and that's the best way to address that. And your second part of the question there, Sylvie, was?
Was about the risk for Putin to threaten to use nuclear.
Well, you know, you've heard us say a number of times that that kind of rhetoric is very dangerous and unhelpful. Nobody wants to see a nuclear war happen. It's a war that, you know, where all sides lose, and so rattling of sabers and you know, dangerous rhetoric is clearly unhelpful and something that we won't engage in.
Our next question goes to Suzanne Geilhard from ZDF.
Mr. Secretary, what military aid do you now expect from the German government? And do you think the delivery of Leopard tanks is sufficient, in your opinion?
You mean cheetahs, which is what
yes.
Well, let me just say that, and I think you probably heard me say this before as I visited Germany, I consider Germany to be a great friend and an ally. You know, I've served in Germany as an officer and worked with German forces, and it's always been a real pleasure to work alongside our German partners there. Now, I think it's significant that you know, Germany announced that it was going to provide 50 Cheetah systems. I think those systems will provide real capability for Ukraine. And in terms of what else Germany will do going forward, again, that's a sovereign decision, one that the German leadership will make, and I don't want to speculate on that. I just believe that just based upon everything that I've seen in my interaction with the Minister of Defense and how intently she's been focused on making sure that she can do everything that she can to help and work alongside her partners and allies, that she'll continue to look for ways to be relevant and provide good capability to the Ukrainians as they continue to prosecute this fight.
Our next question goes to John Ismay, New York Times.
Mr. Secretary, yesterday you mentioned that one of the United States' goals in Ukraine now was to see Russia weakened. Can you explain more fully what that means, and specifically what do you want to weaken and how you would measure success in that regard?
Yeah, John, so I think we've been pretty clear from the outset. We do want to make it harder for Russia to threaten its neighbors and leave them less able to do that. Now, if you look at what's transpired here in this 62 days or so that Ukraine and Russia have been involved in this struggle here, Russia has, in terms of its land forces, their land forces have been attrited in a very significant way. Casualties are pretty substantial. They've lost a lot of equipment. They've used a lot of precision-guided munitions. They've lost a major surface combatant. And so they are, in fact, in terms of military capability, weaker than when it started. And you know, John, it'll be harder for them to replace some of this capability as they go forward because of the sanctions and the trade restrictions that have been placed on them. And so we would like to make sure, again, that they don't have the same type of capability to bully their neighbors that we saw at the outset of this conflict.
Next question goes to Ute Spangenberger from ARD. There she is.
Hello. How can we guarantee a safe and secure Ukraine in future? Is it possible that Ukraine becomes a member of NATO?
That's again, that'll be a sovereign decision. I think that NATO will always stand by its principles of maintaining an open door. So I don't want to speculate on what could come. I do believe that you know, in the future, if the possibility exists, I think Ukraine will seek to once again apply to become a member of NATO. But again, that's That's probably a bit down the road, and speculation at this point is not very helpful. I think the first step is to end this conflict, and I think what needs to happen to cause the conflict to come to an end is Mr. Putin needs to make a decision to end this conflict. He's the person that started it. It was unjustified, and of course, it'll be his decision to de-escalate and then go back to the negotiating table. And we really all would like to see that happen.
Okay, and the last question today, mindful of our time, goes to Uwe Driesen from TV2 Denmark. Uwe.
Thanks. Mr. Secretary, the Russian foreign minister has warned that there's a danger of a third world war, and there's a real danger of nuclear weapons being used in the present situation. Are you not afraid that the conflict will somehow spin out of control and we will have this nuclear confrontation?
Well, we certainly will do everything within our power and within Ukraine. Ukraine will have the same approach, do everything within their power to make sure it doesn't spin out of control. International communities focused on that as well. I think this any bluster about the use of possibility of use of nuclear weapons is very dangerous and unhelpful. Nobody wants to see a nuclear war. Nobody can win that. And as we do things and as we, take actions, we're always mindful of making sure that we have the right balance and that we're taking the right approach. So there's always a possibility that a number of things can happen, but again, I think it's unhelpful and dangerous to rattle sabers and speculate about the use of nuclear weapons. Thanks.
Thank you all. That's all the time we have for today's press conference. We really appreciate you all coming. Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who's at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, taking some questions from the press. Also there you see Admiral John Kirby, who's the Pentagon spokesperson. Also there at that briefing. We were before that. Go ahead, Amber.
I was going to say I thought it was very interesting. He had been meeting with NATO leaders, and we expected, of course, maybe a renewed commitment to helping military aid for Ukraine. But I thought it was particularly interesting that he said an additional goal was a weakened Russia.
Yeah,
and he was asked, what does that mean?
Right.
And he essentially said, we want to make it harder for Russia to bully its neighbors in the future.
That has signaled for a lot of geopolitical analysts a shift in U.S. policy when it comes to this conflict in Ukraine, this war in Ukraine, because you've heard members of the Biden administration now with the Secretary of Defense and others suggesting we just don't know what that means and how that would look.
And discussing whether or not this has transitioned to a certain degree from a conflict between Ukraine and Russia to some sort of proxy conflict between NATO and Russia.
And Russia, yeah. You were, before that, listening to a Senate hearing with the Secretary of State testifying before members of the United States Senate. So there's a lot going on right now in Washington and around the world, but let's take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side with a lot more news. Stick around.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation.